So I will be preaching in English, and I believe there will be translations that will be going in Korean in the back. So please feel free to look up, and you can read ahead, I guess. But the message that we want to look at, the word that we want to look at today is in Joshua chapter 2, verses 1 through 21. It's kind of a long passage, but we're going to look at the story of Rahab. And the title of this message is The Unlikely Saint. Joshua chapter 2, verses 1 through 21. I'm going to assume that everyone's found it. So as I read, please follow along. I'm going to be reading in English. And Joshua the son of Nun sent 2 men secretly from Shittim as spies, saying, "Go view the land, especially Jericho." And they went and came into the house of a prostitute whose name was Rahab, and lodged there. And it was told to the king of Jericho, "Behold, men of Israel have come here tonight to search out the land." Then the king of Jericho sent to Rahab, saying, "Bring out the men who have come to you, who entered your house, for they have come to search out all the land." But the woman who had taken the 2 men, but the woman had taken the 2 men and hidden them. And she said, "True, the men came to me, but I did not know where they were from. And when the gate was about to be closed at dark, the men went out. I do not know where the men went. Pursue them quickly, for you will overtake them." But she had brought them up to the roof and hid them with the stalks of flax that she had laid in order on the roof. So the men pursued after them on the way to Jordan as far as the fords, and the gate was shut as soon as the pursuers had gone out. Before the men lay down, she came up to them on the roof and said to the men, "I know that the Lord has given you the land, and that the fear of you has fallen upon us, and that all the inhabitants of the land melt away before you. For we have heard how the Lord dried up the waters of the Red Sea before you when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to the 2 kings of the Amorites who were beyond the Jordan, to Sihon and Og, whom you devoted to destruction. And as soon as we heard it, our hearts melted, for there was no spirit left in any man because of you. For the Lord your God, He is God in the heavens above and on the earth beneath. Now then, please swear to me by the Lord that as I have dealt kindly with you, you will also deal kindly with my father's house, and give me a sure sign that you will save alive my father and mother, my brothers and sisters, and all who belong to them, and deliver our lives from death." And the men said to her, "Our life for yours, even to death. If you do not tell this business of ours, and when the Lord gives us the land, we will deal kindly and faithfully with you." Then she let them down by a rope through the window, for her house was built into the city wall, so that she lived in the wall. And she said to them, "Go into the hills, or the pursuers will encounter you, and hide there 3 days until the pursuers have returned. Then afterward you may go your way." The men said to her, "We will be guiltless with respect to this oath of yours that you have made us swear. Behold, when we come into the land, you will tie this scarlet cord in the window through which you will let us down, and you shall gather into your house your father and mother, your brothers, and all your father's household. Then if anyone goes out of the doors of your house into the street, his blood will be upon his own head, and we shall be guiltless. But if a hand is laid on anyone who is with you in the house, his blood shall be on our head. But if you tell this business of ours, then we shall be guiltless with respect to your oath and that you have made us swear." And she said, "According to your words, so be it." Then she sent them away, and they departed, and she tied the scarlet cord in the window. Today I have the privilege to share with you the word of the Lord. And the word today, as I discuss, is going to be about this woman named Rahab. And through her story, I just want to share 2 quick points. The amazing love of God and the commendable faith of Rahab. You know, we're jumping right in the middle of this story where the Israelites have been rescued out of Egypt, and with Moses, and after crossing the desert and the wilderness for 40 years, they are now about to enter into the promised land, the land of Canaan. And in order to scout out the land, Joshua, the new leader after Moses, he sends 2 scouts, to go and observe how they might be able to make their attack as successful as possible. And so the soldiers go into the city and they check out the scene, perhaps noting how many soldiers are stationed within the streets, and where the gates are, and how strongly the gates are fortified. And perhaps they notice, many things. And as night falls, as they have to go to sleep, they go to a place where they would draw the least amount of suspicion, and it's the house of a harlot, house of a prostitute named Rahab. But as it turns out, word had already spread. And people already had gotten wind that 2 men from Israel, from outside a different land, had come into the city to scout out the land, to come and find out to find out how they might be able to make an attack. And so the king of Jericho sends several men of his house, his soldiers to Rahab's house, and they demand that she give up the men to arrest them, to capture them. But here's where it gets interesting. Rahab apparently hides the two men on the roof of her home, and not only does she make sure that they can get back out of the city safely, she lies to the soldiers so that she can cover their tracks. And this is one of those things that has always kind of bothered me when I read this story, because Rahab, she lies, right? And God uses that lie as a diversion to save his people, to save the soldiers. And it always bothered me that this lie kind of went, it was kind of condoned. It was part of God's plan, right? It's like, how can this happen, right? How can God use lies? He's an honest God. He's a God of truth, right? It kind of seems like, Bible says in one part, you shall not lie. And then here, Rahab lies, and it's kind of hush-hush, like, oh, it's okay. In certain circumstances, you can, a white lie. And I'm just like, how can this happen, right? And so it always kind of bothered me, but I realized the bigger problem in this passage is not only that Rahab is a liar, but it's that she is a prostitute. She's someone who is of a very lowly social status, someone who sells her body for a living, a woman who lives a very debaucherous life, a very immoral life, right? And so the pieces don't really fit. That this Rahab is not only that person that God uses, but she is spared, she is saved when Israel comes into the land to conquer the land just a few chapters later. It doesn't make sense that the Bible spotlights this woman and then casts her as this heroine, as this good guy. She helped these guys out, she helped God's people, she's the good guy, when she's really not that good. She's immoral, she's dirty, she's shamelessly sinful, she's this prostitute. So in my mind, she has no business being in this limelight. She has no business getting this much exposure and being cast as this heroine. And yet, not only is she spared, but she becomes adopted into the people of God. She becomes actually an Israelite after she is saved. And I ask myself, does that make sense? Does that make sense? The prostitute of all people gets saved. But here we come to see that this is not a mere coincidence. What's interesting is that Rahab is also mentioned in New Testament in two separate instances, and we want to take a look at them today. The first is in the Gospel of Matthew. Oh, we don't have to turn there, but it begins in Matthew chapter 1, verse 1, begins by recording the genealogy of Jesus, beginning with Abraham, and then so forth, and all the way down to Jesus, right? It says Abraham. In verse 2, it says, Abraham was the father of Isaac, right? Isaac was the father of Jacob, and Jacob was the father of Judah and his brothers. And then it continues in verse 5, Solomon was the father of Boaz by Rahab. Boaz was the father of Obed by Ruth, and Obed the father of Jesse. Jesse was the father of David the king. And we know that David, it goes on to say that Jesus is born of this line. Here's what we come to understand, that Rahab is not just an extra. She's not just, okay, we need to play this part out. Someone's got to play the part. We just need someone to come and open the door. We just need someone to hide the soldiers because someone needs to do it. So we're just gonna plug somebody in. She's not an extra. She's actually the main character in this story because Rahab is actually the great grandmother of Jesus. This is also kind of cool, right? Because when you look at the genealogy, normally women are not mentioned, right? It says Abraham begot Isaac. It doesn't say Abraham and Sarah. It just says Abraham. It doesn't say Jacob and Rebekah had Isaac. It just says Jacob had Isaac and so forth. There are only 4 instances where women are mentioned alongside the men. And one of those instances is Rahab. Which means that the writer, Matthew, purposely put her there, right? Because the standard is to not have women in there. It's just to have the guys. So for her name to be included, it means it was intentional. He had to deliberately insert her into the picture. And with that inclusion, here's where we have to understand the heart of God toward us. Normally people want to disassociate themselves with people of certain reputations, right? I think an extreme example of this is Hitler, right? After World War II, people who had last name Hitler, a lot of them changed their names, as you can imagine why, right? I read a story where a student, like a high school student with the last name Hitler, ran for student council and like people booed her off the stage because she was Hitler, right? Imagine if you're Hitler, you're not going to get very many job interviews, you know? So people change their last name because they don't want to be associated with this guy who committed this mass genocide. You know, Korean parents are also very notorious for wanting their children to marry into a good family, right? They're all about, oh, we want you to marry into a prestigious family, someone who has good reputation, right? If someone was known as a criminal, Korean parents would say, oh, no, you can't marry that person because that would bring stain upon our name as well, right? And likewise, we want not only a good person to come into our family, we want to send our children into a good family, right? And this is kind of normal. But here's the truth is God designated a person like Rahab to come into God's family. He adopted her. He associated with her. And we might ask the question, what business does Rahab, being in the Bible in this way, what business does she have to have an entire chapter and a half talk about her story? She doesn't deserve it. And you're right, she doesn't deserve it. But here is the amazing grace of God, that he makes it his business to bring people like Rahab into his family. You know, Jesus came to associate himself with sinners, with tax collectors, and yes, the prostitutes, the lowly people that no one wanted to associate themselves with. Jesus came on this earth to save people like Rahab because he loved them. And he elevated them from the position of a prostitute to that of a child and a daughter of the Most High King. Jesus came because he loved people like Rahab. And this is the most unlikely salvation. This is the most improbable, the most surprising election that Bible constantly reminds us to show us that God does not choose out of merit, out of anything that we do, but instead that God chooses because he is love, because he loves us so much. You know, the story isn't particularly romantic, right? It's not a Korean drama. There's no handsome dude appearing, and there's no, the poor girl who gets lifted up out of poverty. But we might think there are no, typical features of a romantic story in this. But God's love actually bleeds through every word in this story. The way we often think about love is a consumer kind of love. Consumer, right? When you buy something where, we will engage in love that will benefit us and make us feel better. And as a result, this kind of consumer love is focused on the question, what can you do for me? What can this person do for me? And when the person can no longer provide what I need or what I want or what I am looking for, then we find that we no longer love that person. We find that we no longer have the same affections. We find that we no longer have the same emotions about that person. Therefore, this is a very conditional love. However, the Bible tells us that the love of God is not a consumer love, but it is a covenantal love. One that is fundamentally different in that it is unconditional. It prioritizes the other person, and then it asks the question, what can I do for you? What can I do for him? What can I do for her? The reason why God shows us this story of Rahab is to communicate to us his love. If his love was a consumer love, then he would never have saved Rahab or brought her into his family, because he has nothing to gain from her, because she has nothing. She brings nothing to the table. There's no transaction. There's no give and take. Rahab brings nothing. We often have this joke among our staff. We always say, one person will say to another person, give me all your money or give me everything you got. And then the other person's like, yeah, take everything I have, including my debt. And then the other person's like, oh, actually, no, just kidding. You have nothing. I don't want it, right? Because what you have is not even zero. It's less than zero. It's negative, and you keep your negative, right? That's what happens here, right? Rahab is a liability. Rahab is not a benefit. She's not accretive, right? She doesn't bring anything. But God shows that he loves not to get something from us, but to give something to us. It is an unconditional love. And that's why it says in John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he gave. It doesn't say God so loved the world that he wanted to have a good time or that he wanted to enjoy our company. It wasn't about him receiving something from us. God so loved the world that he just simply gave. God laid down his life for people like Rahab, a prostitute, and he sacrificed all that he had for me, a great sinner, so that we can have the greatest gift of all, the eternal life. As this love fills our hearts, God's will is that we would also love our parents, our children, our church members, our coworkers, and our neighbors with this kind of love. My dad is a pastor, so I've had both the fortunate and the unfortunate privilege of being a part of many different church families. But one thing always kind of remains the same, and that church can be difficult. Church can be messy because it involves people. You know, they ran a survey and they asked people, what do you imagine when you think of peace? And everyone replied like, oh, the mountaintops or the beaches or the oceans. And not one of those images had people in them, right? Because when it involves people, it gets messy and it gets difficult. You know, in fact, some people might say that church is messier than the world because when people are hurt, when people are lonely, when people are struggling, where do they go? They go to the church, right? So church is filled with actually, like percentile-wise, there are more hurt people in here than average. There are more lonely people here than average in the outside because people tend to come to church and looking for healing, right? So church is a hospital of broken and hurt souls. And that's why it's even harder to deal with people. And over time, our tendency is to become calloused with hardness from the conflicts and disappointments that we experience time and time again when we deal with people, when we are disappointed by people, and when they offend us, when we are disrespected by them. But I also believe this. I also really, really believe that the local church is the hope of the world. I really believe that the church is a place where God can truly be known and truly be experienced like no other way possible. It is a unique place where people of different socioeconomic classes, where the CEO and then level 1 employee can come and rub shoulders and be family. It is a place where people of different cultural backgrounds and different social backgrounds and different personalities and identities can come together and share a table and say that we are one family. Church is a unique creation of God. It is a place where God's love can be experienced. It's through the weekly activity of doing life with the same people over a long period of time and seeing their flaws come out and then seeing my flaws also come out and also at the same time loving one another unconditionally that we become more like Jesus and we understand more of God's love for us. God loves the Rahab in us so that we can love the Rahab in others. The second point that I want to make is not only does this passage show us the love of God, the amazing love of God, but it also shows us the commendable faith of Rahab. Right, I mentioned that Rahab appears in the New Testament in two instances. The first is in Matthew, but she also appears in the book of Hebrews chapter 11, which is often called a hall of faith because it lists characters in the past who have demonstrated exemplary faith for us to follow. Beginning in verse 4, it says, by faith Abel offered to God a better sacrifice than Cain. By faith Enoch was taken up so that he would not see death. By faith Noah prepared an ark for the salvation of his household. By faith Abraham and Sarah, right? By faith Isaac. By faith Jacob. By faith Joseph. By faith Moses. And if you follow that line, the next person that should come into the picture should be Joshua, right? Moses and Joshua. But after Moses, the person that comes into the picture is actually Rahab. The next part says, by faith, Rahab. It says, by faith, Rahab the prostitute did not perish with those who were disobedient because she had given a friendly welcome to the spies. If Rahab is worth mentioning in this chapter, associated with the likes of Noah, likes of Moses, and the likes of Enoch and Joseph, then her faith must have been a great faith. It must have been something amazing. What was her faith like? What is it about her faith that God found to be so praiseworthy? The Bible defines faith as this. It is the conviction of things not yet seen, the assurance of things yet to come. And I want to talk about faith a little bit, but faith is being so sure of something that you can rest your weight on it. You know, when you drive down the freeway, the reason why you can hit 60 is because you trust your brakes. Right? Otherwise, we would never go above 10, right? Not sure if we can trust our lives upon the brake system, but we go because we trust it. A missionary in a tribal region was in the process of translating the Bible into that native language. And and he was translating the New Testament, but he couldn't find a word that was equivalent with the word for faith, right? To the natives, the word for faith was simply just to hear, right? When they heard something that they believed, they would just say, oh, I hear you, I believe you, I hear you. It was the same thing. But the missionary wasn't satisfied. He wanted to communicate the word faith more clearly, the biblical faith. Not just to believe, but he wanted to somehow communicate this idea better. And so he was contemplating this for months, but one day, a native person, after a long day of work, exhausted, he just came into the missionary's house, he plopped onto the chair, and then he said, oh, it feels so good to rest my whole weight upon this chair. Feels so good to just lie here completely, just on this chair, I'm just resting my weight. And the missionary said, aha, slapped us and he said, yes, that's the word for faith. And so he translated faith as resting wholly upon, putting your entire weight upon that which you believe, that which you trust, right? Faith isn't just to know. It's not even just to agree. It's not even to believe that it's true. It means to rest your weight upon it. So when I go to the hair salon, right, they'll often wash my hair, and then you go to that chair, you lean back, and then they wash your hair for you. And then every time I lean back, for whatever reason, I really tense up, and then I hold up my neck, and then the woman's like, or the man is like, she's like, just relax, like just lean all the way back, and then I'm like, oh, okay, and I just go all the way back, and then I'm like, oh, okay, it feels so good because it's really hard to keep your neck tense for like 3 minutes, right? It's like, oh, it just feels so good. It's to let go and to trust your weight wholly upon something. That's what faith is. The Bible commends Rahab because she exemplified this kind of faith. Think about this. So first off, Rahab is a Canaanite woman who was raised in the Canaanite culture, which means that they worship their own Canaanite gods. I have a friend who grew up in a Muslim household, and then he became a believer in Jesus as an adult. And then when he told his parents told him that they were disappointed that he would turn his back on their heritage. He said, how can you turn your back on our culture, our heritage? And it was kind of hard for him to process this, but I would imagine for Rahab, it's the exact same situation. For her to say, I trust in your God, it means to throw away her culture, right? She has no place to go after this. It's not like she just says, oh, okay, if it doesn't work out, I'll come back. It means, no, I'm leaving my place, right? But not only that, her faith is praised because it was a genuine faith. It was genuine. Look at what she says here. She says, I know that the Lord has given you the land. The Lord your God is the God of the heavens above and on the earth beneath. We have heard how he dried up the waters of the Red Sea before you came out of Egypt, and how you defeated the 2 kings of the Amorites. Rahab heard the reports of how God had brought the Israelites out of Egypt and through the desert, and she believed. She didn't witness the miracles herself. She didn't see the waters part herself. She didn't see the manna fall from the sky herself. She didn't personally witness these things. But when she heard, she believed. Not just, okay, I hope if it works out, I want to be on your team. But it is, no, I'm jumping ship to your team. I'm going to switch. I'm pledging allegiance to you. In that current moment, the small nation of Israel, with their little military power, posed no threat to the big nation, the big city of Jericho. And yet, she said, I will hang this scarlet cord as a sign that I trust you. I trust that the Lord will do what he does. She had such faith, and if she had been wrong, she would have certainly been killed as a traitor. Rahab put her life on the line because she believed. And this is why the Bible commends her. The Bible tells us this is a kind of faith that pleases God. Actually, it says that without this kind of faith, it is impossible to please God. Without this trust, without this complete trust, where I am completely sitting on this and I don't have just 1 foot on the ground and half my body weight on this, but complete trust. It is impossible to please him. And when God does see this kind of faith, he is mightily pleased. Why? Because it shows that we really trust him. We're putting our money where our mouth is. It means that we're not just saying it with our words, we're not giving him lip service, but we are serving him with our lives. We are really, really believing his word. Church of Bethlehem, my hope is that we would grow as people and families of this kind of faith. The only way that our children will grow into this kind of faith is if we show them from an early age that this is possible and it is realistic. You know, kids these days live in this era where yes, they go to church and they grow up in the church, but in their minds, in the corner of their minds, they are thinking, yeah, but no one really lives like this. Yeah, but this isn't really realistic. Yeah, this is archaic. I need to take the Bible and I need to synchronize it. I need to combine it with worldly knowledge because this isn't realistic. We have to show them that it is possible. What the students need and what we want from ourselves, isn't it just not to hear the gospel, but to see the gospel lived out? Not just to hear about gospel's power, but to have the gospel's power in our lives. When we live faithfully and see God respond, when we're willing to put the scarlet cord and see that God spares our lives, isn't that the kind of faith that we want to see in our lives? And this is key. You know, when you look at the story of David, why is it that young David was able to take on the giant Goliath? You know, the remarkable thing about his story is not that David won. That's not that remarkable. It is remarkable, but the more remarkable, the more striking thing that we have to understand is, how was David able to even go out in the first place? Cancel the victory. That came, but how was he able to even say, I will fight him? When everyone else was scattered about, when no one else wanted to rise up to the challenge, why was it that David himself said, no, I will step up? Why? What was in him? How was this possible? And I would wager it's because young David had practice. Young David had experience. It wasn't his first time doing this. When he goes before Saul and tells King Saul, he says, Saul, I'm going to go and I'm going to fight this guy. Saul says, David, you're too young. You're too inexperienced, and that guy is a fighter. He's much bigger than you. But David responds with this. He says, yeah, but when I was a shepherd for my father, when a bear or a lion would come and take one of the sheep and run off with it, I would chase after that bear and lion, and I would hunt it down. I would fight with it, wrestle with it. I would literally pull hair and then pull its whiskers and pull its beard, and I have been victorious. I have killed lions and I've killed bears. And so when I see Goliath, I mean, bear, lion, Goliath, what is the same thing? I'll fight any one of them, and I've won before. He had experience, he had practice. If he had not experienced it, I highly doubt David would have stepped up. He's not a fool. He doesn't want to die like anyone else, but it's because he knew. The first time I translated Pastor Lee's sermons, live, I wasn't sure if I could do it. I was nervous, and I don't know if you could tell, but my hand was shaking, right? Trying all that I can to make sure it doesn't show, all I was hoping for was that I wouldn't mess up too badly. But I've done it enough times where I'm confident, right? I feel like I can do it, and on the spot, on the fly. I feel like I can do it before more people. I feel like I can do it on a bigger stage. If someone came and said, look, we have this event, we need someone to translate, can you do it? I feel like I can say, yes, I can do it. Why? Because I've had practice, because I've had experience. This is what our kids need to know and to have seen. There will be a time when our children will need to take a leap of faith. There will be a time when they will need to say, I trust God. I need to trust God, and I want to trust God with this. But the way they get there is when we show them the small victories along the way, when we're able to prepare them for these moments. If they have wrestled with their doubts from an early age in their ordinary lives, like David, dealing with lions and bears in their ordinary lives, having taken the small steps of faith and seen God respond, then they can take on bigger challenges. The biggest thing that we can give, the most precious thing that we can give to our kids is not anything, but it is certainty in God. It is a greater faith. When life hits, when the storms of life they come, when uncertainty begins to strike at our lives, what we need, what the kids need, what our children need more than anything else, what they need is not certainty. No one can give someone certainty. No one can say, I'll tell you exactly how your life is going to turn out. This is what's going to happen. At your age, they're going to go to this company, you're going to work here. No one can tell us. No one has the future, only God. We cannot give anyone certainty. But what we can give them is confidence that everything will be all right because my God is with me, as we just saying, if my God is for me, then who can be against me? Rahab had this kind of faith. Confidence is a combination of two words. Con, it means with, and fides, which means faith. When you have faith, you naturally become confident. This is the greatest blessing, the gift that we can give to our kids. In the practical ways, I would say this. Teach your children the importance of worship in everyday life, right? Show them that your family will love the Word of God, not just with word, but in practice. Your kids need to see, the children need to see that you really love God. We're not in an age any longer where believing in God is normal. Even in America, you cannot just go and say, you're sinners. Before it worked, oh, I'm a sinner. Now people say, who's God and why am I a sinner? It's not accepted for you to just go through the motions. People want to see that it's genuine. We need to show our kids that this is real. Faith is real. God is real. Teach them that when they're wrong, we trust in God to make things right. We turn the other cheek. We don't go after the person that hurt us. We don't seek vengeance. We really trust that God will take care of us. We really, really trust it. Show them this. Teach them that we're not about success. When there's an opportunity to make more money, but there's an opportunity to honor God more, show them that honoring God is better, so that the kids really understand that it's not about money, that life is not about it. That we don't just say, oh, yeah, Jesus is better than money, but in practice, we know that money is better. Teach them and show them that this is real. And when kids see this, they will grow up as people who can trust God because they've seen God respond. And this will help them to grow into the kind of people that God will use to transform and change this life. I've always said this before, the greatest thing that you can give your children is not a great financial inheritance. What the kids need is not an inheritance of $1 million or $2 million or whatever. What they need is not a house. What they need is for you to show them faith. What they need is for you to transfer to them, give to them this genuine spiritual inheritance, that this is a household that will worship the Lord. And when we do, God will honor us because we have honored him. So my prayer is this, that we would become this kind of a family as a church and as a household. And that we would learn from Rahab's example. The two things, the amazing love of God and the amazing faith that she also showed in response. I want to lead us in a time of prayer for the next about 20 minutes. So I don't know if the praise team is going to come up, but